Amen. Join me, if you will, in the book of Genesis. And you can stand to your feet as you're looking. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. So all you got to do is open up and take a right turn a few pages, and you should stumble into Genesis. We'll be in chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11, starting in verse 27 and going through chapter 12, verse 4. And then you can just stay there, but then I'm also going to jump over to Acts, the book of Acts, chapter 7, and I'm also going to read verses 2 through 4, just to give us a little bit more clarity around the text. If you have it, say, I got it. If your phone doesn't have a good signal and you're still waiting for it to load, say, wait on me. All right, so everybody must have it. I'm reading from the English Standard Version of the Hebrew text. And the Bible reads, starting in verse 27. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Verse 31, Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Let me read that again. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and from your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all of the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And I'm flipping over to the book of Acts, chapter 7, starting in verse 2. And Stephen said, brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, go out from your land and from your kindred and go into the land that I will show you. Then he being Abram, went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And his father died, and after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. You may be seated. For the brief time that I have with you all this morning, I want to talk to you from the subject, bust a move. Bust a move. And the question that I'll tag on to the end of that is, how are we to properly respond to the call of God? The book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible, but before we jump too far into Genesis, I want to tell you about a book series that I discovered when I was growing up. Back in 1979, the year I was born, a man started a new kind of book series. And this book series was called what they called a game book. And the series that they used, the name that they used, amen, series was called Choose Your Own Adventure. Anybody grow up in the 80s and 90s and remember Choose Your Own Adventure? Okay, so a couple people tracking with me. So Choose Your Own Adventure was not a typical book. In a typical book, you start in the beginning and you read all the way to the end, and the author tells you what you need to know, and he tells you all that is going to happen in the story, and then you get to the ending, and then that's what you have. But Choose Your Own Adventure was much different. Choose Your Own Adventure allowed you to choose how the ending was going to play out in the book. So you would read for a few pages, then you come to a page and it would give you a few options. Which way do you want this adventure to go? So you would choose from the options on the page and you would flip over to the page that you liked and you would read a little bit more, and then that next page would give you a few more options. Where do you want this story to go? Our lives are a lot like this book series, Choose Your Own Adventure. See, inevitably in life, we are faced with different options and different decisions that we have to make. As we flip through the few pages of our lives known as the days, months, and years, what begins to happen are options begin to come onto our radar, and we have to choose between the best options for us, for our families, so that the adventure that we're on called life will go in the direction that we desire for it to go. In the text today, we are going to encounter a man by the name of Abram. And Abram is about to choose his own adventure. He's going to be faced with a very difficult decision, and the decision that he makes is going to dictate what the rest of his life is going to look like. And so what we're going to discover today through Abram and how he chose to respond to his adventure, how we are to properly respond to the call of God on our lives. The book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and if you had to put a hashtag to it, it would just say start here, hashtag start here. And when we get to where we're going to, amen, today, between Genesis chapter 11 and Genesis chapter 12, we are literally straddling two themes in this one book of the Bible. See, the book of Genesis has as its theme new beginnings, but right here on the line of chapter 11 and 12, we encounter the two themes. On the left side of the line is Genesis chapter 1 through 11, and we learn that God has a plan for mankind, but mankind fell off the wall and broke up into pieces. So mankind is broken. And then when we get to the right of the line in Genesis chapter 12 through 50, we see God's plan to pick up the broken pieces from man and put them back together again. But not only are we straddling the two themes in the one book, but we're also straddling one trip that has two distinct itineraries. You remember that Abram and his family set out from Ur of the Chaldeans, put in their GPS or put in Google Maps, they put in Canaan as their destination. But the Bible says that something happened in between when they left Ur and when Abram finally arrives in the land of Canaan. And what we're going to discover today are three things that are going to help you and I follow the voice of the Lord properly. And the first thing that we must do is to break out of our comfort zone. We got to break out of our comfort zone. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, that they went forth from the land of Ur to the land of Canaan. Now, y'all, this is an 1,100-mile walk. This is the equivalent of walking from Houston, Texas to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Let me say it again. This is the equivalent of walking from Houston, Texas to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Most of us would struggle if we were asked to walk from here to Galveston. But he's being asked to walk from Ur to Canaan, 1,100 miles. But the Bible says that when they came to a place called Haran, they settled there. Now, Haran is not Canaan. Haran is about 600 miles to Fort Lauderdale. It's about in Pensacola, but it's not the destination. So how did they arrive and end up settling in a place that was short of where God told them to go? Well, let's see. See, the word Haran, ironically, means road. Right? So a road is an instrument used to move people from one place to another. But on this particular road, Abram and his family end up setting up a permanent residence in a place that only should have been a pit stop. let me just throw this out here for you guys. Be careful of building a house where you ought to just pitch a tent. Be careful that you don't set up permanent residence in a place that God only has you temporarily. But Abram finds himself settling in Haran. Now, Haran, y'all, is not a bad place. Haran is actually a pretty nice place. It's a place of comfort. It's a place of opportunity. It's a place where you can live the Haranian dream. You know the Haranian dream. It says that you can have a house in the suburbs. It says you can have a couple of nice cars and you can wear certain names on the labels of your clothes. The Haranian dream says you'll have a 401k, then the company will match you 9%. The Haranian dream says you'll have good benefits, Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare. The Haranian dream is what everyone is looking after. And it's accessible in Haran. And what we learn in Genesis chapter 12 and verse 5 and in Genesis chapter 13 verse 6 that Abraham became filthy rich in this place called Haran. Abraham, if he were living today, Abraham would be a man amongst men. He would be the guy that you see on all the talk show circuits. He would be on The View. He would be on Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel. He would be on the Oprah Network. He would be on the front of Black Enterprise. He would be on the front of Business Weekly. He would be on the front of GQ magazine. He would be probably known as one of the most interesting men in all of the land. This is what happened for Abram in this place called Haran. But for all that Haran had to offer, Haran is also a very dangerous place. See, Haran, I'm not saying that Haran had a high crime rate. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that Haran didn't have some seedy sections that you need to stay away from. What makes Haran such a dangerous place is that Haran becomes a place of comfort. Haran facilitates us getting settled into a comfort zone. And the problem with the comfort zone is when we arrive there, the first thing to drift away is our spiritual fervor. See, when we get too comfortable, we stop depending on God for the things that we should be depending on God for, and that's everything. See, we begin to depend on ourselves, and that always turns out poorly for us. And I like to say the comfort zone leads us to a place called the spiritual doldrums. Let me just talk about me. I love being comfortable. I'm sorry. There's nothing that brings me more pleasure than sitting on my couch and propping up my laptop on my lap, turning on my Netflix on the TV, and just chilling out. I love that. I love my comfort zone. But at the same time, my comfort zone also has the ability to rob me of my prayer life, to rob me of my word life, to rob me of my worship life. When I get too comfortable and I have too much free time on my hands, it leads me to drift away in my commitment and my excitement for the Lord. You may not admit to this, but many of you all are the same way. See, when you get to the doldrums, let me just tell you about the doldrums real quick. The doldrums, if you were sleeping through geography like me, you'll have to kind of learn this afresh today. The doldrums was a place around the equator. It sat between two tropical kind of things. I can't remember what you call them. I told you I slept through geography. And so it had this weather effect around the equator that was known for its calmness. So around this place called the doldrums, there was no wind. There was no agitation. There were no storms. There was nothing there was just nothing. It was just quiet and calm. The problem with the doldrums, though, is if you were a sailor on a sailboat and you got to the doldrums, you were stuck. Because if you're a sailor on a sailboat, the one thing that aids you in your journey is a little bit of agitation in the sails. See, it's okay to have a windstorm come through because you know what? It pushes you along the way in your journey. It's okay to have a few storms come by because that agitates the sails and pushes you forward in your journey. And the problem with the doldrums in our lives is that there's not enough agitation to push us forward in our journey. See, it's okay. You can get excited every now and then about a storm in your life because it's typically the storm that brings you to your knees. If you were honest with yourself, some of you would not be praying if it hadn't been for the pink slip that you got on your job. If some of you were honest with us today, you wouldn't have the prayer life you did if your child didn't get locked up. Some of you would not be in church today if your marriage were not on the rocks. Because you all know, like I know, that just a drop of agitation can lead to a river of spiritual progress. And this is what Abram is confronted with in this place called Haran. Haran is synonymous with our comfort zone, and it's responsible for murdering more progress than anything else. And the comfort zone, I've come to learn, is the place where the voice of God is the hardest to hear, and it's the hardest to obey. But in verse 31, he uses this word, settle. He says that they got to Haran and they settled there. Now, settle can mean two different things, and I think the author is making a word play on this word settle. A settler is one that relocates to a new area and begins to live in that place. They get a bank account, they put their kids in school, they get a place to live, they get a job, and they have settled in the place. But settle also means to be content with something less than what God desires for your life. And so what's happening in Haran was they were settling for good enough instead of going forward into what God told them to go to. See, I've settled for a few things every now and then in my life. I'll settle, I'll be honest. But there's some things that I just won't settle for. I remember one day a few months ago, I had got my mouth set on some baby back ribs and some brisket. Like really, really set on some baby back ribs and brisket. So I gathered up my family and said, hey, y'all, we huddled around noon. I said, y'all, we're going to so-and-so's barbecue place. I don't want to put them on blast today. We're going to this barbecue place because I have my heart set on some baby back ribs and brisket, and this is the only place I know that can scratch that itch. And so I didn't eat all day, y'all. I'm saving my calories for this barbecue because I told first I was not planning on getting a salad. I was going with the French fries, the ribs, and the baby back ribs, and I might have even got dessert with that thing because I didn't eat all day. I'm saving my calories. I'm excited. So we get in the car way out in Cypress, and we drive to the other side of town. And we get there, and there's a long line. And, the kids are hungry, and my wife is hungry. She gets a table. It's packed. But I'm like, you know what, y'all just wait. Just wait. We about to be eating good here in a minute. So I'm in line, and the line takes about 15 minutes. And I get up to the front register. My mouth set for these baby back ribs and this brisket. And I get to the front, and I say, I'll take the baby back rib and brisket combo. And the lady replies to me. She says, we're out of baby back ribs. I smile. I said, you're, say that one more time. No, sir, we're out of baby back ribs. In my mind, I'm thinking, it's Saturday night, 6 o'clock. You got to know people are coming up in here to get some ribs. But I ain't say that. I ain't say it. So I'm in my mind, I said, well, if you don't have baby back ribs, what do you have? And she said, well, we have spare ribs. I said, no, I can't do spare ribs tonight. I can't do spare ribs tonight. And I said, you know what? Thank you, ma'am, but we can't eat here tonight. We can't eat here tonight. And so now I have this long walk to the table to tell my wife that we've been sitting here for about 20 minutes now and that we're not eating here because they don't have the baby back ribs. So I get to my wife and I say, hey, she's like, where's the food? I said, well, they don't have baby back ribs. And she's like, and? And I'm like, no. No, we came to get baby back ribs and brisket. So I took my family, we packed back up, got back into the car, went on Google Maps to find the nearest barbecue place that would have some baby back ribs and brisket. We did that, y'all. Why did we do that? Because I wasn't going to settle for some spare ribs. Spare ribs would have been good enough, but they would not have been baby back ribs. There are things in all of our lives that we will not settle for. We won't settle for driving a car that's been made past a certain year. Some of us won't settle for living in a certain type of neighborhood. Some of us won't settle for a job that's not paying a certain amount of money. But the question on the table is, when it comes to our relationship with God, will we refuse to settle and thereby bust out of our comfort zone to do what God is calling us to do? There was a young man by the name of Daniel. Daniel, in his self-titled book, the book of Daniel, was a young man who refused to settle. If you're single out there, young ladies, there are some men out there that will refuse to settle, and so you don't have to settle for good enough. I'm not gonna drive down that lane, because that's a message for Shine. That's a message for our church. But if you're in the area and you need a little encouragement, we'll be talking about that. But we can learn a lot from Daniel, because Daniel refused to settle for the comforts of his surroundings. It says in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which the king drank. So he sought permission from the commander that he might not defile himself. So Daniel went on a fast. Why? It wasn't because he needed to lose weight. The Bible doesn't say that. He went on the fast, choosing to avoid the comforts of his environment because he wanted to maintain his spiritual edge. If you and I are going to maintain ours, we have to be careful and intentional about breaking out of our comfort zone. That's the first thing. But the second thing we must do if we want to respond appropriately to the call of God in our lives is that we must bravely step into the unknown. We must bravely step into the unknown. Here's what Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 says. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. This is quite a wild proposition. This is something that no one in Abram's time would leave all of that behind to travel to a place that they don't even know. And I would pay money, y'all. Not a lot, but I would pay something to be a fly on the wall between in Abram's house to hear that conversation between Abram and his wife. Every time I read this, I just imagine in my mind what that looked like. Abraham walks into the living room. Sarah's just doing her thing. And he says, baby, go pack your bags. We about to go. And she's like, well, hey, where are we going? Oh, we just pack your bags. Trust me, we just about to go. We about to go. And she gets excited, like, oh, my man about to take me for a little weekend getaway. So she goes into the closet and she pulls out her little suitcases and she gets on social media texting folks, look, I got me a good man. Hashtag I love me some Abe. And look, y'all, she done got on Snapchat and she started her story about this little weekend vacation that her man is going to take her on. And while she's in the closet packing her bags, Abraham comes, he kind of shuffles in there with his head down. Baby, I didn't, Yeah, you're going to pack your bags here, but we're not going for a weekend vacation. I saw what you just posted on Facebook. Actually, we're taking everything, and we're relocating. Like we're taking everything. We're packing up the house and the kids and all the service and everything, and we are relocating to a place that God is going to show us. And I imagine he just walked out the room because he was scared of what was going to happen. And then I imagine her getting on Facebook, back on there and posting, y'all ain't gonna believe this. Hashtag, why did I get married? But Abram was doing something that made no sense. It probably made no sense to him and definitely probably didn't make sense to the people that he was packing up and taking with him, because what he was doing was making a trade. He was trading in certainty for the uncertain. He was trading in the known for the unknown. He was trading in the secure for the scary. He was trading in prosperity for the prospect of poverty. But ultimately, he was trading his agenda for God's agenda. We can learn a lesson from Abraham. But the question that I always ask myself is, what would possess a man like Abram who does not yet even believe in the God that we believe in? What would possess him to make a decision like that? And the answer, my brothers and sisters, is faith. What would possess him, you ask? The answer is faith. When you are brave enough, and when I am brave enough to step out into the unknown, when people are asking you, why are you doing that? All you need to give them is the same answer Abraham had, which is faith. When you walk away from your job, or you get more involved in ministry, or you do whatever God is telling you to do, when people question you, why would you do such a thing? All you got to do is tell them, it's faith. It's faith. But what did Abram have faith in? Well, yes, he had faith in God. And he had faith that if God was telling him to go there, that there was more for him to gain there, but there was also a lot for him to lose staying right here. Let me say that again. Abram had faith in God that if he was moving him there, that there was more there for him, but at the same time, there was a lot for him to lose if he were to stay right there. See, the problem with us, the reason why we don't step out bravely is because we think if we stay here that nothing's wrong. There's nothing. I don't lose anything by staying here, but it's awfully scary and risky over there. But let me just show you. I'm going to paint a picture for you real quick of how actually staying here can cost you more than going there. When I was a young guy, I think I still am pretty young, but when I was younger, I was about half the age I am now, a guy approached me about some money that I had accumulated when I was working an internship while I was in college. And he was trying to, he was a salesman, trying to get me to invest my money. And I'm, kind of leery of salesmen. Sorry if you're a salesman, but I'm a little bit leery. And so he was saying, look, young man, this money, these thousands of dollars that you have in the savings account, if you move that to a mutual fund, what's going to happen over time, your money is going to grow. And when it grows, by the time you're 40, you'll be able to take out this money and do a lot of stuff with if you choose to. And I was like, but at the same time, I can also lose my money over there, right? And he was like, well, yeah. I mean, there is risk, but when you look at the history of the stock market, typically things go up like this. There may be some dips and divots, but you know what? For the most part, it's going to go up. So it's pretty safe to do that. But I'm like, I just don't want to take that risk. Because if I leave it right here in my savings account, I don't have to risk anything. It's comfortable. It's secure. Whenever I need it, I can get it. He said, but hold on, young man. There's something that you're not accounting for with leaving your money in this savings account right here. And it's this concept called inflation. What inflation tells you is that the dollar value that you have today will not be able to acquire as many goods tomorrow. So if you leave your money in a place that's safe, like a savings account, 30 years later, you're going to have less buying power with that same money than you did back then. Y'all remember a time when gas was like 99 cents a gallon. I remember that. I'm not that young. Gas was 99 cents for unleaded, the cheapest kind, 99 cents. Now we paying double that at least.